today we are going to brainstorm and revise the things that are connected to the third conditional sentences. And before we start doing exactly the sentences which are connected to, or exercises which are connected to these conditionals, we are going to do some reading here, which is going to be very, very interesting because all those stories are based on true stories, something that has really happened to some people sometime in the past. So definitely, so while we are reading these, some of those short stories that are here, we should be able to think what would happen in a little bit different way that the conditions had been a bit different. So first of all, I would like you to go through this exercise here to read a story about two friends and to underline three sentences that belong to these third conditional sentences. So read and listen at the same time, and then it's going to be easier for you to do this kind of exercises. So it's going to be 3.13, no, 15. So let's go through it.
CD3. Track 15.
Decision time. In 1985, two young climbers, Joe Simpson and Simon Yates, were the first climbers to climb the west face of the Ciudad Grande mountain in the Andes. But as they were coming down the mountain, Simpson fell and broke his leg badly. Yates had to make a terrible decision. Should he leave his friend, or should he try to get him down the mountain? He chose the second option. If he had left his friend, Simpson would have died. Yates tied himself to Simpson with a rope, and they slowly came down the mountain together. Then disaster struck again. Simpson fell and was hanging over a cliff. Yates couldn't hold him. He found his penknife and decided to cut the rope. Simpson fell 25 meters. Yates returned to base camp alone. He was sure Simpson was dead. But he also knew that if he hadn't cut the rope, he would have fallen and died too. Miraculously, Simpson didn't die. He pulled himself slowly along the ground with a broken leg for 3 days and nights. He arrived back at base camp just in time. Yates would have already left if Simpson had arrived a few hours later.
Okay, so now you have heard the text. And what do you think about the things that they did? Or better to say, what about this Simon Yates? Do you think that he had made the right decision? So he made two decisions. The first one was, okay, should he leave his best friend or not? Or should he cut the rope or not? And he didn't leave him at the first time, but then he cut off the rope. So was he right or not? We are going to discuss about it. And what is going to be your opinion if you were in similar situations like this Simon Yates was? So, okay, so we know what has happened. And in this text, we have on three places those conditional sentences. The first one is here. If he had left, his friend Simon would have died. Then, if he hadn't cut the rope, he would have fallen and died too. And the last one is, in the last one, Yates would have already left as Simpson had arrived a few hours later. Now, when you focus on those three sentences, can you tell me, for example, did this happen? Is this imaginary situation or something that really happened? Of course, according to this, we know that it is something what would be imaginary. And if you focus on this, you are going to see some kind of, like always, complex sentences, and then you are going to see that we are talking about third conditional sentences. And here we have the grammar focus. And in grammar focus, definition, the use, and the form. you use the third conditional to talk about the imaginary past results of an imaginary past event. Imaginary past event, if and past perfect, an imaginary past result would or wouldn't plus have and past participle. This construction is also known as perfect conditional. And you have here more things about this type, definitely, of conditional sentences. So what do we know about this conditional? That refer to situations definitely in the past, and action could have happened in the past if a certain condition have been fulfilled, but the things were different then. If you have a sentence, for example, if I had found her address, I would have sent her an invitation. This means that I didn't have find it, that I didn't have, send her an invitation. So we didn't fulfill this condition. And everything again here is connected to something. That how do we form this? So in each sentence again, past perfect, showing us condition, and in the main one, the consequence of that condition would have plus participle. Then we have here a lot of those examples, everything connected to past. Here is an exercise which you are going to send me after you do it. And for the end, you will have something like a quiz. This is something for yourself, but if you aren't so sure about the use of these conditional sentences in general, then I just recommend you to go to the YouTube and to watch one English teacher explaining all of them together and together. Now, when we have finished this, I would like you to concentrate definitely here in the book on our page on exercise 4, where we have to complete the third conditional sentences about the story with the correct form of the verbs in the bracket. Okay, here it is. We can start with this one. So we have to complete the third conditional sentences about the story with correct form. So if Simpson hadn't fallen, he wouldn't have broken his leg. If Simpson hadn't broken his leg, the climbers wouldn't or would have come down the mountain without a problem. If Yates had been able to hold Simpson, he wouldn't have had to cut the rope. Yates wouldn't be able to cut the rope if he hadn't found a penknife. And the last one, Yates wouldn't have left Simpson on the mountain if he had known he was still alive. So this was pretty easy. You always do something opposite. Šta bi se desilo da je bila neka druga situacija? Okay, so let's go furthermore. In the next exercise here, we have 3 survival stories, 3 true stories here, and your task is here to write, for example, something new, third conditional sentences in order to have alternative outcomes for each story. So what do we have here? In 2003, Aaron Ralston went hiking alone in a canyon of Utah. He trapped his arm under a rock and couldn't move. He had a penknife. He cut off his own arm, and Ralston survived. Under B. In 1996, Pete Ross was leading a round-the-world yacht race. During a terrible storm, he got an emergency call. Another competitor, Rafael Dinelli, was in trouble, and Gott's boat was the only one in the area. Goss turned back, he saved Dinelli's life, and lost the race. And the last one. In 1972, the pilot of a plane carrying a Ukrainian rugby team miscalculated his position, and it crashed 3,600 meters up in the ends. The plane was white and the rescue teams couldn't see it. There was no food and the survivors had to eat their dead teammates. Only 16 people survived. Now, what should be your task? To write something a bit different. For example, for the first one, is Well, if Ralston had gone hiking with a friend, his friend would have helped him. So we are talking about imaginary situation in the past. I suppose that you have heard about this when Aaron Ralston, because last year we talked about a film which was shot after this true story. So what should we add here? If he hadn't trapped his arm, he could have moved. If he hadn't had a penknife, he wouldn't have cut off his arm. The next one. What about this under B? If there hadn't been a terrible storm, Pete Goss wouldn't have gotten an emergency call. And if Goss hadn't turned back and saved Denali's life, he wouldn't have lost the race. And the last one, if the pilot of a plane hadn't miscalculated his position, the plane wouldn't have crashed in the ends. If the plane hadn't been white, the rescue teams would have seen it. If there had been some food, the survivors wouldn't have eaten their dead teammates. So these are maybe some of the things that, for example, could be written about the text in order to change a little bit these happenings. Okay, and what about here? You have to add to complete the third conditional sentences, and this is something that we will do during the class. And here we should go to grammar focus on page 123. There we have 3 more exercises, all of them connected to those. Oh my god, I made a mistake. So quickly, let's go. So it's going to be 122, I think. So it's going to be 6.5 and third conditional. Yes, I'm right now. So the first exercise says match the sentence beginning with the endings. So how are we going to do this? So we would have lost our way if we hadn't had our GPS with us. If you had left earlier, what would happen? You would have caught the train. 3. They wouldn't have gone into difficulties if the rescue team had arrived earlier. If she had known his real character, she wouldn't have married him. If I had prepared for the trip better, I would have enjoyed. So here they are, some of those exercises. So we have 2 more exercises with this one. So we have to put the verbs in correct form to get or to have these third conditional sentences. Number 1. Would the explorers have survived if they had taken better treatment? If Louis hadn't warned me, I would have made a serious mistake. If you had left an hour earlier, would you have missed the play? If I hadn't taken a torch with me, I wouldn't have found my way out. What would you do if your parents hadn't let you take a gap year? And the last one, if Tom hadn't found a hospital quickly, he would have died after the snake bite. So it's pretty easy because you have to worry just about correct tenses. In if sentence always past perfect, and in the main sentence would have, and the main verb in the third column. Here is another exercise, and you have to write different sentences for each situation. For example, they didn't reach the North Pole because they ran out of food. So, if they hadn't ran out of food, they would have reached the North Pole. If I hadn't been tired yesterday, I would have gone out with my friends. It wouldn't have taken us ages to get to the airport if there hadn't been a lot of traffic. Anna would have phoned me, or it's better to say, if I had known, I would have told Anna about her problems. Next one, if he hadn't gone, or if he hadn't had an accident in the mountains, he wouldn't have had to go to the hospital. If Gina had used a mosquito net, a mosquito wouldn't have bitten her and she wouldn't have become ill with malaria. If Joe had worn warm clothes last weekend, he wouldn't have caught a cold. And the last one, we didn't reach our destination because the weather conditions were very bad. We would have reached our destination if the weather conditions hadn't been so bad. So that's it. All in all, you have more exercises given on your presentation. So I hope that you will do it and you will learn those conditional sentences.